So, if you want to win the absolutely most important high-stakes battle of your life, the greatest strategic mind in human history says your very first move should actually be, well, to do absolutely nothing.
Right. It sounds crazy.
It sounds totally crazy. I mean, in fact, if you actually end up fighting, this genius of warfare would say you've already failed.
Yeah, you've completely messed up the strategy at that point.
Exactly. So today we are going into a deep dive on a manual that proves why winning a knockdown dragout fight is, actually the hallmark of a terrible strategist. We are exploring a text from over 2 millennia ago that is still obsessively studied today by modern CEOs, legendary sports coaches, and basically leaders across every single competitive industry. I am talking, of course, about Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
It's just entirely counterintuitive, which is, I think, what makes it so endlessly fascinating.
Oh, totally.
Because you open a book with the word war in the title, and you're expecting this manual on aggression and, like, sheer force. And instead, you get this absolute masterpiece on restraint, psychology, and, well, really the mechanics of human nature.
Right. Now, I have to set the stage for you, the listener, and for you, my incredibly patient guide today.
Always happy to help.
I appreciate that because I am coming into this deep dive with absolutely zero military knowledge, like none at all.
Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, the closest I've ever come to a real battlefield is a highly competitive and frankly ruinous game of Monopoly with my siblings.
Oh, yeah. Monopoly ruins families.
It really does. So, when I sit down with the complete unabridged audio transcript of this ancient text, chapters 1 through 13, and I'm reading all about heavy chariots and marching through salt marshes and avoiding an enemy whose banners are in perfect order.
Right, the really archaic stuff.
Yeah. I just have to admit, my very first thought is, how on earth does any of this apply to my Tuesday morning staff meeting? Or, like a salary negotiation, or trying to launch a business.
And honestly, that is the perfect mindset to have.
Yeah.
Because underneath all the tactical jargon about chariots and siege warfare, Sun Tzu is really offering this profound psychological blueprint.
Right.
I mean, the chariots are just the technology of his specific time. But the underlying physics of conflict, leverage, and human behavior, those haven't changed one bit in 2,000 years.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So our mission today is basically to strip away all that ancient armor and look at the absolute core of these strategies so you can actually use them.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because we've got this massive compilation of ancient wisdom, and the overarching theme right out of the gate in chapter 1 is the foundational requirement of any undertaking. The text talks about laying plans.
Yes, the calculations in the temple.
Right. And it establishes the stakes immediately, calling this art a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin, which is super intense.
It doesn't hold back.
No, not at all. But before you even make a move, the text insists that you have to sit in your temple and make calculations based on 5 constant factors.
The famous 5 factors. Yeah, this is really where the mechanics of strategy begin.
Right.
Sun Tzu argues that a leader who makes many calculations in his temple before the battle will win, while the one who makes few calculations will lose.
Okay.
And he demands that you measure your position against 5 very specific variables. So that's the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
Okay, let me take a stab at translating these, because when I first read them, they sounded incredibly mystical.
They do sound a bit like a fantasy novel at first.
Exactly. But if I apply them to, say, launching a small business or planning a massive career pivot, they actually map perfectly to a modern variable.
Oh, perfectly. Go ahead, break them down.
Okay, so let's start with moral law. I feel like most people reading that today probably think it means, like, having a good corporate social responsibility policy or being highly ethical.
Sure, that's the modern association with the word moral.
Right. But the text defines it as that which causes the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so they follow him regardless of their lives. So structurally, it's not about ethics at all, is it?
Not even a little bit.
It's about absolute lethal alignment. It's your core company culture, right?
You are hitting on the exact mechanical truth of the concept. It is pure alignment.
Wow.
If we look at how that actually functions in a modern organization, a leader might think they have moral law just because they wrote a nice, mission statement on a whiteboard in the break room.
Right, like synergistic paradigms or whatever.
Exactly. But Sun Tzu is asking, when the pressure is immense, when the runway is shrinking and payroll is tight, do your people believe in the overarching vision so deeply that they will endure extreme hardship to achieve it?
Ah, Because if they don't, you don't actually have moral law. You just have employees collecting a paycheck.
Spot on.
And the moment things get tough, they'll just jump ship.
Precisely the danger. I mean, you can have the most disruptive tech product in the whole world, but if your team doesn't intrinsically believe in the why of the mission, the entire enterprise just shatters under the friction of reality.
That makes total sense. Okay, then we have heaven and earth.
Right, the environmental factors.
Yeah, so the text says heaven signifies night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. And earth comprises distances, danger and security, open ground, and narrow passes.
Correct.
So if I'm building out my business plan in my temple, heaven is my timing, and earth is my environment.
Let's expand on how those interact, because it's
Yeah.
crucial. Heaven is the temporal context. It's the variables you absolutely cannot control, but you have to adapt to.
Okay, like what?
In your business analogy, heaven is the macroeconomic climate. Are interest rates skyrocketing? Is there a sudden boom in artificial intelligence?
Oh, I see.
You can't fight the winter.
Yeah.
You can only prepare your winter clothes.
That is a great way to put it. You just have to deal with the weather.
Exactly. And Earth is the physical or structural landscape you are choosing to walk into.
So that would be the regulatory hurdles of your industry.
Yes. Or the barrier to entry. Are you operating in a saturated market, which the text might call open ground, where anyone can attack you from any side?
Oh, wow.
Or are you operating in a highly specialized, patented niche, a narrow pass, where a small, well-equipped team can hold off a massive corporation?
I love that mapping. That makes so much sense. Which brings us to the final two variables that actually navigate that timing and environment, right? The commander and method and discipline.
Exactly. The human element and the operational element.
Right. So the commander represents leadership qualities. The text lists wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness.
Yes.
And then method and discipline represent the logistics, the organizational chart, the control of expenditure, the supply chain.
What's really fascinating here is the tension between those leadership traits.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, you need benevolence, right? You need to care for your
Yeah.
people. But you also need absolute strictness.
Because if you don't have the strictness, everything falls apart.
Exactly. And if you don't have the method and discipline, the budget, the operational flow, your visionary commander is just a dreamer with no actual engine to drive the car.
That is so true. You have to ruthlessly calculate all 5 of these in your temple before you do anything. But here is where the text throws a massive curveball that I really, really struggled with.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. Once you've done all this planning, Sun Tzu drops this absolute bombshell. He says, all warfare is based on deception.
The cornerstone of his tactical execution.
But I have to push back on this. Because the text goes on to elaborate, right? It says, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. If I am applying this to my career or my negotiations or even my personal life, this sounds incredibly toxic.
It does sound harsh.
It sounds like a literal manual for being a manipulative, gaslighting liar. How do we extract anything positive from a philosophy that is entirely built on deception?
That friction you're feeling is completely valid. And honestly, it's a huge hurdle for many modern readers.
Okay, good. So it's not just me.
Not at all. We naturally attach heavy moral baggage to the word deception. And frankly, yes, in a literal life or death war, Sun Tzu is advocating for absolute ruthlessness.
Right.
But if we extract the structural mechanics of what he's teaching for everyday competitive environments, we really have to reframe the word deception as information control.
Information control. Okay, meaning like not broadcasting your intentions to the entire world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about the physics of a negotiation.
Okay.
Let's say you were buying a house or maybe acquiring a smaller company. If you walk into that room and operate with total radical transparency. Right. Like if you tell the seller, I am absolutely desperate for this specific property. My apartment lease is up literally tomorrow, and I have a maximum budget of exactly $1.5 million. What happens?
I get absolutely taken to the cleaners.
Yep.
They are going to squeeze me for every single penny of that 1.5 million because they know I have no other options. I just made myself completely vulnerable.
Exactly. Because you voluntarily handed them the exact data they needed to defeat you.
Wow. Okay.
Sun Tzu is arguing that your internal reality, your true capability, your desperation, your deadlines, is your most valuable strategic asset.
Right.
So appearing weak when you are strong or near when you are far isn't about malicious lying. It's about protecting your core vulnerabilities from people whose explicit goal is to exploit them.
I completely see the distinction now. It's kind of like keeping your cards close to your chest in poker.
Exactly like poker.
Because if you show everyone your hand, you aren't being noble, you're just failing at the game.
Exactly. You're just handing over your chips.
And the text even gives examples of this psychological projection, which is wild. It says, if your opponent has a choleric temper, seek to irritate him. If he is taking his ease, give him no rest.
Yes, active disruption.
So you are basically managing their perception, forcing them to react to an illusion you've created while you maintain your actual plan in complete secret.
And you don't just manage their perception, right? You actively disrupt their equilibrium. If you know a competitor is prone to making rash decisions when provoked.
You just poke them a little bit.
Yes. You introduce a slight irritation to trigger that reflex.
Yeah.
You drain their energy while conserving your own.
Which brings us to a really harsh reality in the text. Because planning in the temple and controlling your information are fantastic when you are dealing in theory.
But theory only goes so far.
Right. The moment you actually commit to an action, you introduce the most dangerous variable of all, which is economics. The text gets incredibly pragmatic here, detailing the sheer, staggering cost of conflict.
Oh, the transition from the theoretical to the material is absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Sun Tzu outlines the logistics of raising an army of 100,000 men, provisioning them, sending them across massive distances, maintaining heavy and swift chariots.
Just the math of it is insane.
It is. He calculates the daily expenditure at home and at the front, and arrives at the figure of 1,000 ounces of silver a day.
1,000 ounces of silver a day,
Which
just to keep the machine running.
Just to exist on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that this economic drain is the ultimate enemy. He observes that if a campaign is protracted, the resources of the state simply won't be equal to the strain.
Because you just run out of money.
Exactly. He says, if victory is long in coming, then men's weapons will grow dull and their ardor will be damped.
I want to translate that 1,000 ounces of silver into modern currency. And I don't just mean dollars, you know?
What do you mean?
Like, if we look at a protracted conflict today, say a toxic, drawn-out office rivalry where two executives are just constantly sabotaging each other.
Those are the worst.
Or like a 2-year-long lawsuit over a property line. Or honestly, even just an endless, furious argument with a complete stranger on the internet.
Right. So what is the silver being spent in those modern scenarios?
It's your cognitive bandwidth. It's your emotional runway. It's the actual hours of sleep you are losing every single night.
Yes.
And obviously, it's the actual capital spent on legal fees or lost productivity. Every day you stay in that fight, you are bleeding resources.
That is a perfect translation.
Because even if you quote-unquote win that office rivalry and the other executive finally quits after 2 years, your weapons are dull.
Right.
You are totally burned out.
And your reputation of the company is probably damaged too.
Exactly, because everyone views you as difficult to work with. The state, meaning your own personal well-being and career capital, is completely impoverished.
Which perfectly illustrates Sun Tzu's most defining paradox.
Yeah.
He states quite bluntly, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged war.
Not at all.
And because of that brutal economic reality, he introduces a concept that completely redefines what it means to be a strategist.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
He says, in the practical art of war, the best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good.
This was the moment in the text that completely blew my mind. He basically says that fighting and conquering in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.
Without fighting, that's the key.
The ultimate flex of a master general is never even drawing their sword.
It is a complete inversion of how we typically view victory, especially in Western cultures. We often associate winning with domination, destruction, leaving the opponent in ruins.
Right, like crushing the competition.
But Sun Tzu views destruction as a failure of efficiency. If you destroy the enemy's country, what have you actually won?
Just a bunch of ash and rubble.
Exactly. Ash and rubble that you now have to spend your own silver to rebuild.
So the hierarchy of strategy he lays out is so fascinating. He says the absolute best method is to balk the enemy's plans, stop them before they even start.
Yes.
The next best is to prevent the junction of their forces, meaning just isolate them. The next is to actually attack their army in the field. And the absolute worst policy of all, the one he clearly despises, is to besiege walled cities.
The siege is the ultimate manifestation of stupid haste and prolonged war.
Right.
He describes how building the movable shelters and earthworks takes months.
Hmm.
And if a general loses his emotional control and launches his men like swarming ants against the walls, he'll lose a third of his entire army, and the city still won't be taken.
Translating that siege metaphor, I mean, that's like launching a massive hostile corporate takeover
Yeah.
or launching a multi-million-dollar ad campaign directly against an entrenched legacy brand's strongest product.
It's exactly like that.
You are literally throwing resources at a reinforced brick wall. It's ruinous. So how do we avoid the siege? How do we take the country whole? The text offers a tactical solution here that I just found brilliant. Yes. It says a wise general makes a point of foraging on the enemy. It calculates that 1 cartload of the enemy's provisions is equivalent to 20 of one's own.
Let's look at the mechanics of foraging, because it's brilliant. When you bring your own supplies from deep within your own territory, the transportation cost is astronomical.
Because of the distance.
Right. Every mile you move that cart, the people moving it are eating the food inside it. By the time it reaches the front line, there's barely anything left.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
But if you take 1 cart from the enemy, you save all that logistical waste.
I immediately thought of a lean tech startup trying to compete with a massive legacy corporation.
No, that's a great example.
Right, because the corporation has unlimited silver. They spend $50 million a year on R&D, market testing focus groups, and figuring out what consumers absolutely hate.
Which is incredibly expensive.
But the startup doesn't have that silver, so they forage. They let the legacy corporation spend the millions to educate the market and identify all the pitfalls.
Right.
Then the startup just swoops in, reads the competitors' public data, learns from their massive marketing failures, and builds a better product without spending a single dime on the initial research. You use the opponent's momentum and resources to feed your own strategy.
It's highly efficient.
Yeah.
And it requires a really deep understanding of both the environment and the opponent, which basically culminates in arguably the most quoted axiom in the entire text.
Oh, I know this one.
Sun Tzu lays out the mathematical formula for survival. He says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
Right.
If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle.
The math here is so unforgiving.
It really is.
What stands out to me is that self-awareness is the absolute baseline for survival.
Yes.
Because if you don't have good intel on your competitor, but you have a brutally honest understanding of your own weaknesses, your own burn rate, your own moral law, you have a 50-50 shot.
Exactly. You might take a hit, but you'll survive to fight another day.
But if you walk into a market completely delusional about your own capabilities and you don't understand the competitor, total annihilation.
Self-awareness is the ultimate defensive shield. And that logic bridges us perfectly into a radical shift in how we approach conflict.
Okay.
If the goal is to win without fighting, and self-awareness is our shield, how do we construct a posture so intimidating, so structurally sound, that no one even attempts to challenge us?
Right. Like, how do we become the general who balks the enemy's plans just by existing?
Exactly.
The text addresses this in the chapters covering tactics and energy. Sun Tzu introduces the concept of invincibility, and he frames it in a way that feels almost backward to me.
How so?
He says, the good fighters of old first put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat and then waited for an opportunity of defeating the enemy.
The key phrase there is waited for an opportunity. He explicitly states, to secure ourselves against defeat lies in our own hands, but the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself.
That completely upends the modern hustle culture mentality.
Oh, entirely.
Because we are constantly taught that success is something you have to aggressively seize, you have to force it, you have to outwork everyone and impose your will on the market.
Grind until you win.
All right, but Sun Tzu says you literally cannot force a victory against a competent opponent.
Because attempting to force a victory usually requires overextending yourself. And what does that do? It creates a vulnerability.
Ah, right.
So instead, you perfect your defenses. You ensure your logistics are flawless. You eliminate your unforced errors. You become a fortress. And then you observe.
It totally reminds me of watching amateur tennis.
Tennis. Okay, lay that out.
Well, when you watch two regular people play, just at the local park, the person who wins the match is almost never the one trying to hit those aggressive, baseline, scorching, professional-level winner shots.
Because they miss most of the time.
Exactly. The person who wins is the one who simply decides to return the ball over the net safely in bounds every single time. They make zero unforced errors. They put themselves beyond the possibility of defeat.
That's a brilliant analogy.
And they just wait for the other person to get frustrated, try something way too aggressive, and smash the ball right into the net. The victory is provided by the opponent's lack of patience.
That is the exact mechanism he's describing. The text notes, he wins his battles by making no mistakes. Making no mistakes is what establishes the certainty of victory, for it means conquering an enemy that is already defeated.
So, when that opponent makes their mistake when they hit the ball short, how do we actually capitalize on it? Sun Tzu uses these beautiful poetic metaphors about direct and indirect tactics to explain maneuverability.
5 notes, right?
Yeah, he says there are only 5 musical notes, but their combinations create endless melodies. Only 5 primary colors, but they produce more hues than can ever be seen. And in strategy, just 2 methods of attack, direct and indirect, but they lead to an endless series of maneuvers.
This requires a level of adaptability that he ultimately embodies in his most famous metaphor, which is water.
Yes, the water principle.
He argues that military tactics are like unto water, for water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak.
Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. Just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions.
Let's apply the physics of water to a really common professional roadblock.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine you are trying to push a new initiative forward, but you are blocked by a notoriously stubborn, ego-driven department head.
We've all met the guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, if you use direct tactics, if you march into their office, demand compliance, and argue your points aggressively, you are attacking a fortified wall. You are literally bashing your head against a rock.
And the rock doesn't care. It just gives you a concussion.
Exactly. But if you apply the water principle, you flow around the obstacle. You don't attack their ego at all. You bypass it. You find the path of least resistance.
How does that look in practice?
Maybe you reframe your initiative so that it solves a specific problem that department head has been constantly complaining about. You align with their gravity.
Oh, I see.
You strike at the weak point their need for a quick win or their desire for budget relief. You retain no constant shape.
Okay, I love the water metaphor, but I really have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't this whole concept, making yourself invincible, eliminating your mistakes, and just waiting for the enemy to provide the opportunity, isn't that dangerously passive?
It can seem that way, yes.
Because it sounds like we are just becoming a puddle on the floor, waiting for life to happen to us, and letting the terrain dictate literally all our moves.
It is a really common misinterpretation to confuse restraint with passivity. But Sun Tzu counters this critique brilliantly with the analogy of the crossbow.
Okay, the crossbow.
He states, energy may be likened to the bending of a crossbow, decision to the releasing of a trigger.
The onset of troops is like the rush of a torrent, which will even roll stones along in its course.
Right. Waiting for the opponent to make a mistake is not sitting idly by. It is the accumulation of latent energy.
Okay.
Picture a master archer with a drawn crossbow. They are perfectly still. They are waiting. But there is nothing passive about that stillness.
Because the tension is insane.
Exactly. The mechanical tension in that weapon is immense. The archer is hyper-alert. Their breathing is controlled. They are perfectly balanced. They are maintaining a state of maximum potential energy.
Right.
When the target finally shifts and exposes a vulnerability, the decision to release the trigger takes a fraction of a second, and the impact is absolutely devastating.
So it's not a stagnant puddle at all. It's a dam holding back a massive reservoir.
Yes.
The text actually uses that imagery. It talks about the bursting of pent-up waters into a chasm 1,000 fathoms deep and comparing momentum to a round stone rolled down a mountain thousands of feet in height.
It's all about gravity and potential.
You hold back, you build the pressure, and when the tiny crack in the enemy's defense appears, gravity takes over and the momentum is just unstoppable.
But here's the critical challenge. Maintaining that level of latent energy, holding that crossbow string back without your arms shaking, requires supreme discipline.
Oh, for sure.
You have to know exactly when to release the trigger. And that requires an incredibly acute awareness of your environment and an iron grip on your own emotions.
Which transitions us perfectly into the human element of all this, because theoretical energy is great, but we're dealing with human beings who get tired, they get confused, and they get angry.
Yes, the messy part of strategy.
In the middle section of the book, Sun Tzu pivots to the gritty reality of maneuvering a massive organization, reading the environment, and dealing with our own psychological flaws.
He essentially acts as a behavioral psychologist here.
Yeah, he really does.
He starts by addressing the sheer friction of communication. He notes that on a chaotic battlefield, the spoken word just doesn't carry far enough. So armies instituted gongs and drums.
Because you can't hear someone yelling over a battle.
Exactly. Ordinary objects couldn't be seen through the dust, so they instituted banners and flags. The whole purpose is to focus the ears and eyes of the host on one particular point.
It's ancient organizational communication theory. I mean, if you are leading a massive remote workforce today, you obviously aren't using gongs and banners.
Well, fully not.
Right. But you are using company-wide Slack channels, town hall meetings, and highly visible OKRs to ensure everyone is moving as a single united body.
Exactly the same principle.
But what I found even more fascinating than how he communicates with his own team is how he reads the opponent's nonverbal communication. He lists dozens of environmental and behavioral cues.
Oh, he becomes incredibly granular here, acting almost like a forensic investigator. He points out that the rising of birds in their flight is the sign of an ambuscade. Startled beasts indicate that a sudden attack is coming. If dust rises in a high column, chariots are advancing. If it's low and spread out, it's infantry.
And as fun as the ancient CSI stuff is, the cues that immediately apply today are the human behavioral ones.
Which one stood out to you?
Well, listen to this translation. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to attack are signs that he will retreat.
It is the timeless truth of watching what people actually do, not what they say.
It is the exact definition of corporate doublespeak. I mean, we have all witnessed this.
Oh, definitely.
When a struggling company suddenly issues a press release full of humble words, talking endlessly about how much they value the quote-unquote corporate family, how they are entering a thoughtful period of strategic realignment, all while quietly hiring 3 different crisis management consulting firms.
A massive layoff is coming.
Exactly. They are advancing on the workforce.
And conversely, consider the competitor who is loudly bragging in the press, using violent language about how they are going to totally crush your market share and dominate the industry this quarter.
They are usually overcompensating, right?
100%.
They are trying to scare you away from realizing that they just lost their lead engineer and their funding is drying up fast. They are retreating behind a wall of noise.
He also teaches you to read the internal morale of the opponent's organization.
Oh, right.
He says, when soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. If there is a disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the officers are angry, it means the men are weary.
So cool.
He is basically giving you a framework to sense the structural integrity of the people across the table from you.
But the absolute peak of his psychological analysis, and frankly, the section that I think every modern leader should have framed on their desk, is when he turns that profiling inward.
The fatal flaws.
Yes. He outlines the 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. These are the internal psychological levers that an opponent can pull to destroy you.
Let's examine the mechanics of these fatal flaws because they are so universal.
Okay.
He categorizes them as 1, recklessness, which leads to destruction; 2, cowardice, which leads to capture; 3, a hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults; 4, a delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame; and 5, over-solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble.
Recklessness and cowardice feel fairly self-explanatory, right? Just acting blindly without calculating the 5 factors, or being so paralyzed by fear of the earth and heaven that you never move at all.
Sure, those are the basics.
But the next 2, a hasty temper and a delicate honor, those are pure, unadulterated ego traps.
Completely.
How does an opponent actually exploit a delicate honor mechanically?
Well, let's map out the causal loop of a delicate honor. Imagine a CEO who is obsessed with their personal brand and being perceived as an industry genius.
Okay, I can picture a few of those.
They have a delicate honor, right? They're absolutely terrified of public shame. So an opponent recognizes this. The opponent then orchestrates a minor, highly public embarrassment, perhaps a viral tweet mocking the CEO's latest product launch, or a slightly insulting op-ed in a trade magazine.
Oh, so it's a manufactured slight.
Exactly. Now, a leader with actual emotional control would recognize this as a distraction and just ignore it. But the CEO with a delicate honor panics to save face. Their ego takes the wheel.
Right.
They immediately pivot, their PR team, their legal department, and their own cognitive bandwidth to fight this completely meaningless battle. They pour silver into a protracted war over a bruised ego. Meanwhile, while the CEO is entirely distracted by their honor, the opponent quietly acquires the key supplier the CEO actually needed for their next quarter.
Wow.
The opponent takes the actual strategic objective because the CEO was busy fighting a phantom.
That is terrifyingly accurate. They essentially weaponize the CEO's own narcissism against them. Yeah. And a hasty temper functions the exact same way. We've all had the boss who derails a crucial million-dollar strategy meeting just because they felt someone's tone was slightly disrespectful. They abandon the high ground just to prove they are in charge.
But the fifth fault is often the most surprising to modern sensibilities, don't you think?
Oh, over-solicitude for his men. Yes, this one really threw me.
Why is that?
Because isn't a leader supposed to care deeply for their team? In fact, in another chapter, Sun Tzu explicitly says, "Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys." But here, he lists caring too much as a fatal flaw.
He reconciles this beautifully by distinguishing between deep care and detrimental indulgence.
Okay, explain that.
He says you must look upon them as your beloved sons, yes. But if, however, you are indulgent but unable to make your authority felt, kind-hearted but unable to enforce your commands, then your soldiers must be likened to spoiled children. They are useless for any practical purpose.
Useless for any practical purpose. That is such a devastating critique of the people-pleasing manager.
It really is.
Think about the over-solicitous team leader who is so desperate to be liked, so worried about causing anyone discomfort that they literally never give constructive feedback.
They shield the team from everything.
Right. They take the difficult clients, they never enforce deadlines, and they absorb all the stress themselves.
And what is the mechanical result of that management style?
The team never builds any resilience. They become incredibly fragile. So when a real crisis inevitably hits, the team just shatters because they've never actually been tested.
Precisely.
So if an opponent sees that a leader is over-solicitous, they know they can exploit that weakness by applying pressure directly to the team, knowing the leader will bend over backwards, compromise the mission, and surrender strategic advantages just to alleviate their team's temporary discomfort.
It is a profound warning about the duality of leadership. A commander must possess deep benevolence, but they must also possess the icy strictness required to maintain the method and discipline necessary for actual survival.
Man, so we've covered a massive amount of ground. We know how to plan in the temple, how to conserve our silver by winning without fighting, how to build latent energy like a crossbow, and how to avoid our own ego traps.
The foundational toolkit.
But let's be incredibly real for a second. Life doesn't always care about our plans.
Rarely does.
Sometimes, despite flawless calculations, the market crashes, a black swan event happens, and suddenly we are backed into an absolute corner. We are totally out of options.
How does Sun Tzu tell us to handle sheer desperation?
That reality takes us into the final chapters we are analyzing today, 11, 12, and 13.
Yeah.
In chapter 11, he categorizes 9 varieties of ground you might find yourself on.
Okay.
But the most critical one for understanding the extremes of human potential is desperate ground.
He defines it brutally. He says it's ground on which we can only be saved from destruction by fighting without delay.
And his advice for desperate ground is chillingly simple. He says, on desperate ground, fight.
Just fight. But the strategic genius here isn't just surviving desperate ground. It's about how a master leader will intentionally use desperate ground as a psychological mechanism to extract impossible strength from their people.
Wait, intentionally?
Yes. He says, throw your soldiers into positions whence there is no escape, and they will prefer death to flight. If they will face death, there is nothing they may not achieve.
Oh, this is the origin of the phrase burning your boats.
Exactly.
The text vividly describes this. It says, at the critical moment, the leader of an army acts like one who has climbed up a height and then kicks away the ladder behind him. He burns his boats and breaks his cooking pots.
Breaking the cooking pots is such a great image.
Right, because you are physically removing the option of retreat. You are telling your people, we are either eating the enemy's food tonight or we are starving. Going back is mechanically impossible.
Let's unpack the psychology of the safety net for a minute.
Yeah, please.
Human beings are incredibly adept at conserving energy. When we have a comfortable fallback option, when there is an easy way out, we rarely commit 100% of our capacity to a risky endeavor.
We just coast.
Subconsciously, we hold back. But when the safety net is incinerated, when we are placed on desperate ground, our primal survival instincts completely override our hesitations. The biological response to having no retreat is total, unmitigated focus.
If we translate this out of life or death warfare and into like a massive life transition,
Okay, let's hear it.
imagine someone who wants to start their own company, but they are terrified of the risk, so they hold on to a comfortable, low-stress, well-paying corporate job.
Very common scenario.
They work on their startup on the weekends, giving it maybe 20% of their energy.
Sure.
When the startup hits a roadblock, they easily give up for the week because they still have their corporate salary.
Yeah, the cooking pots.
Exactly. Sun Tzu is essentially arguing that if you want to achieve the extraordinary, the safety net is actually your biggest enemy. You have to quit the corporate job. You have to burn the boats.
Yes.
You have to place yourself in a position where failure means you literally cannot pay your mortgage. That level of absolute terrifying commitment forces an ingenuity and resilience you didn't even know you had.
It forces absolute clarity of purpose. But, and this is a massive caveat that Sun Tzu introduces immediately afterward in chapter 12,
Yeah.
the attack by fire, that immense passionate commitment cannot be allowed to mutate into unchecked emotional aggression.
Which is so ironic to me because attacking with fire sounds like the most aggressive, dramatic thing you could possibly do.
It does sound like sheer destruction.
But he actually uses this chapter to deliver a sobering, almost melancholic lesson on emotional restraint. He writes, "No ruler should put troops into the field merely to gratify his own spleen. No general should fight a battle simply out of pique."
Pique being a sudden feeling of irritation, resentment, or wounded pride. He is demanding that you completely divorce your strategic actions from your temporary emotional states.
Right.
He says, if it is to your advantage, move forward. If not, stay where you are. And then he delivers what might be the most haunting, sobering lines in the entire text.
Oh, I know the one.
Anger may in time change to gladness. Vexation may be succeeded by content. But a kingdom that has once been destroyed can never come back again into being, nor can the dead ever be brought back to life.
That passage literally gave me chills when I listened to the audio. It is the ultimate argument against reactive decision-making.
It's so powerful.
Think about how many kingdoms we destroy in our daily lives just out of momentary pique. You receive a frustrating email from a long-term client, your hasty temper flares up, and you fire off a blistering, bridge-burning response.
We've all been tempted to do that.
Right. And then 30 minutes later, your anger changes to gladness, or at least you calm down. You reread the email and realize you completely misunderstood their tone. But the damage is done.
The bridge is burned.
The professional relationship, the kingdom, is reduced to ash, and you cannot bring it back.
It requires a deeply paradoxical state of mind. You must possess the fierce, burning commitment of someone fighting on desperate ground, but you must simultaneously maintain the icy, calculating discipline of someone who never, ever pulls a trigger out of momentary emotion.
And to maintain that level of icy discipline, to always know with absolute certainty whether a move is truly to your advantage, you need the ultimate currency of conflict. You need data.
Yes.
Which brings us to the final chapter, chapter 13, the use of spies.
Sun Tzu places the highest possible value on intelligence gathering. He states, what enables the wise sovereign and the good general to strike and conquer and achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men is foreknowledge.
Foreknowledge.
And he is highly pragmatic about how you acquire it. Foreknowledge cannot be magically elicited from ghosts or spirits, nor deduced from calculations alone. It has to be bought from other men who know the enemy's actual situation.
Right. He dedicates an entire chapter to the mechanics of espionage, detailing local spies, inward spies, doomed spies. But beneath the cloak and dagger terminology, the core lesson is about the absolute necessity and the profound morality of paying for high-quality information.
Yes, he does the math again here.
He does. He reminds the reader that raising an army drains 1,000 ounces of silver a day. Hostile armies will face each other for years, draining the state's wealth, striving for a victory that will ultimately be decided in a single day of battle.
And based on that terrifying math, he makes a profound ethical judgment. He says, this being so, to remain in ignorance of the enemy's conditions simply because one grudges the outlay of 100 ounces of silver in honors and emoluments is the height of inhumanity.
The height of inhumanity. The strongest language he uses in the entire book is reserved for the leader who is simply too cheap to pay for good data.
Because refusing to invest in information when the stakes are life and death isn't just bad strategy, it is a moral failure. You are risking the lives of your people and the survival of your state to save a microscopic fraction of the budget.
Translating the spy into modern terms, I mean, a spy isn't someone wiretapping a competitor's phone.
No, of course not.
A spy is networking, it's informational interviews, it's paying for premium market research, it's hiring a veteran consultant or a mentor who has already navigated the landscape you are trying to enter.
Absolutely.
If you are going to launch a $2 million initiative and you refuse to spend $20,000 on a consultant who can give you the foreknowledge of whether the market actually wants your product, you aren't being frugal. You are being dangerously arrogant.
You are acting with a supreme lack of intelligence, to borrow another of his phrases. Foreknowledge is the guarantee that your calculations in the temple are based on reality, not on your own optimistic delusions.
So, what does this all mean? We've traversed the entire philosophy, from the temple to the battlefield and back into the mind. If we synthesize all of this, if we pull back and look at the grand unified theory of Sun Tzu, what is the ultimate takeaway for the modern listener trying to navigate their own life?
I think the overarching thesis is that conflict, whether physical, professional, or personal, is inherently chaotic, brutally expensive, and deeply dangerous to your well-being.
Right.
Therefore, the only reliable way to survive it is to win in the mind long before you ever take the field. You master your own internal variables, you adapt like water to the external reality, you aggressively protect your own information while investing heavily in foreknowledge, and above all, you master your own emotional impulses.
It's a complete paradigm shift. I mean, we started by learning that success isn't about blind hustle. It requires meticulous calculation of those 5 constant factors.
Right? That's simple work.
We learned the paradox of supreme excellence, that the greatest victory is breaking the resistance without fighting, preserving your precious 1,000 ounces of silver.
We saw how to make ourselves invincible, not by forcing victory, but by eliminating our own unforced errors, waiting patiently with the latent energy of a drawn crossbow, and flowing around the strongest obstacles like water.
We recognized our own fatal flaws, the hasty tempers, the delicate honors, the over-solicitude that opponents can pull like levers to manipulate us.
Yeah, the ego traps.
And finally, we learned the unimaginable power of absolute commitment on desperate ground, tempered always by the mandate to never act out of temporary anger, and the necessity of investing in foreknowledge.
It is a totally comprehensive framework for navigating the friction of human existence.
And that's exactly why we wanted to decode this for you, because as you face your own daily battles, whether you are walking into a massive salary negotiation, trying to outmaneuver a toxic dynamic at work, or simply trying to achieve a monumental personal goal, you are dealing with these exact same forces of energy, preparation, and ego.
It all translates perfectly.
The heavy chariots are long gone, but the mechanics of human nature have not changed one bit in 2,000 years.
Which leaves us with a final, lingering paradox to consider.
Oh, what's that?
Well, Sun Tzu says that the skillful general conducts his army as though he were leading a single man by the hand.
Okay.
As you look at the structure of your own life, your job, and your daily habits, are you the general leading the way, or are you the single man being led by someone else's strategy?
Wow. Now that is something to think about the next time you are tempted to enter a battle you don't actually need to fight. Calculate in your temple, flow like water, guard your honor, and whatever you do, don't act out of pique. That wraps up our deep dive into the timeless mechanics of the art of war.